You can start, I'll be there in a minute.
Okay. Well, anyway, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody, for those of you who are running along today, what we appreciate here. I think the information so far has been great. And before I introduce the panel, and we have a number of questions we're going to talk about, there are just two things that I want to put out. One, we have some of these, I know a couple of you have bought them. It's Trevor Loudon's latest movie, which came out last fall, and it was designed to help the presidential election get to where it got on its own. But the information contained in this movie is actually far better and far more useful today than it was before the election. Because Trevor, as he's predicts things very well, it's like he's got, I keep calling him when he's at home in New Zealand saying, will you just give me the lottery number so I know what to play? But anyway, he's talking about how the progressives have basically started all this fighting and all the chaos that we see on the news. And he predicted it, he's talked about it, he tells you how to get around it, where it comes from, and who's orchestrating it. So it's not a bad idea if you don't have one of those to get it. The other little thing before we start, we just
Only
got to get our
$15.
More $15? Okay, yes. I wanted to make an announcement about a charity that's out of Georgia. And the reason I want to bring this up very quickly, if you have anybody have any interest, just come talk to me later. And I would actually think the bloggers and anybody who has a radio show or any kind of show ought to have these people on. It's called Curing Kids for Cancer, of cancer rather. I'm at the Mecum Classic Car events. It's the only charity that Mecum puts on their events, where Bear Jackson kind of does it for anybody and everybody. They don't even verify how good they are as a charity. This group, 85.7% of the money that they raise goes to research or paying bills for kids with cancer. But the reason I bring this up, I've been hearing for now about 2 years about this new treatment that they have, which is extremely inexpensive in the cancer world. It's only $25,000. It started out with leukemia for kids. It's now going into other cancers. And guess what the complete cure rate is? I don't mean a remission, I mean a complete cure rate is. Take a guess what this treatment's doing. Just take a number. What would you guys think would be a great number?
50%, 25%.
It's at 94%. It's amazing. And now, 6 days ago, maybe 7 days ago, no, 6 days ago, the FDA has approved this treatment. So it's no longer considered an out-of-the-box treatment, so it will go mainstream. These people in the last 6 years have raised over $10 million, which means they've basically given away 8.5, close to $9 million. And they have funded kids all over the United States to go to the several hospitals that were doing this research. And they also have found out, amazingly, that it's going to maybe work on adults someday. And just as an interesting thing, guess where this treatment came from and how they did the development on it. It's kind of fascinating. They studied zebrafish. Zebrafish have a very similar immune system to humans, except for their first 3 months of life they have no immune system. And since they're basically clear, they can put in a disease inside a zebrafish and watch it move around and grow and do all that kind of stuff, and that's where this treatment came from. It's really an amazing thing. If you have any information on it, again, it's Curing Kids with Cancer. It's out of Georgia. I'd be more than happy to go to any group and talk about it or share information with you. But let me introduce. Standing, trying to figure out just what the heck's going on there, because we were doing so well. This is Mike Rogers from Granite Rock.
It'll be done in a second.
He'll be done in a second.
We're just restarting the live stream.
Yep. And that's Chris Mader from Meat and Potato Show. He's from the Worcester Tea Party. He is also filming this. Pete Jennings, he died, a tech guy on the radio and in the restaurant. He has basically put this event together for us. Matt O'Brien from Worcester Tea Party. Diana Claus from ACT. Casey McCain. Pat Humphreys from the Boston Tea Party. Myself, John Weston, used to be on Right Overnight Radio, and now I'm on the Right Group up in, where are we? Basically all over southern New Hampshire on Tuesday afternoons, 90.7 FM WLMW. And just do it one day a week, but eventually we'll get back on the air. So, Peter, you wanted to start and talk about DACA. Why don't you bring up the conversation?
Getting going.
All right. Well, we'll start with DACA.
And of course, we have DACA being the deferred action for minors who are here illegally. And we're seeing an awful lot of pushback from the mainstream media concerning DACA, a program that Barack Obama had said was a temporary measure. And even though it's a temporary measure, apparently the enforcement of this law has driven people wild. Stacy and I were in Harvard, and when we arrived at Harvard to have our time with the college Republicans there was a DACA protest in progress, although I don't know how many of the Harvard students there were taking in illegal immigrants into their home and so forth. So let's go with the panel here, and I want to start with the Worcester Tea Party since you've done so much here. How is it that this law cannot be enforced? Immigration law cannot be enforced, but other laws must be enforced, or else you're un-American. For example, you might remember the controversy in Kentucky when a registrar would not register gay marriages. And when that law, when the federal ruling was not being enforced, this was a great tragedy. But now, disobeying the law is chic and wonderful. How can that be?
You see, I see this as an example of a concept called dynamic truth. Law is dynamic now. There are some laws that are valid and some laws that are invalid. Now, I'll tell you that I like the coming, anarchy, where we'll all drive 120 miles an hour and nobody will register their guns, and I'll vote 72 times for president. I'll just drive around to different towns and vote. This all seems like a good idea to me because, I'm fairly well prepared for this, being a knuckle-dragging Neanderthal. I think most people, though, depend upon civilization, and civilization has a certain level of compromise. And the compromise is that you give up certain independent actions to conform to the will of your neighbors and to cope with society as a whole. Yeah, that's fine, I guess, if you're not strong enough to beat everybody around you into submission.
And Diane, one of the things that's come up in some of the reporting is that up to 40 to 50% of DACA applicants, as there's a story out today, may be fraudulent. And I can't help but think of the vetting controversy concerning letting in potential Islamists from various countries, where the media took a conniption at the idea of holding immigration for 3 months while we actually vet people. The last administration doesn't seem to want to enforce the law. What is wrong with actually vetting people to see if they actually are properly here and properly even subject to DACA?
For DACA, in general, I don't know that we can vet people because people can lie. So I don't. I know it's not politically correct, but you can't vet people. In terms of DACA, I also heard that about 72% of these DACA children are on welfare. And so the question I have, and especially for the politicians and the people that are supposed to protect Americans, why are they spending my tax dollars on somebody else? So I don't know if I answered exactly your question, but I think that if somebody wants to come into my house, they either ring the bell, they call me, they knock. I either invite them in, I don't invite them in, and that's the way it should be with immigration.
Now, Stacy McCain, along those lines, we were noticing in Harvard, as we were walking back to the Harvard yard at one point, there was a homeless fellow who was shaking his thing, asking for quarters, and I didn't see any of the people at the DACA protest in a rush to invite him to come into the Harvard University, to set up a tent, to make himself at home. And I can't help but remember when a journalist had come home and found a squatter and had called the police, yet this same journalist is big into DACA, big into illegal immigration. And how is it that the basic concept that a person should ask to come in be a concept that can't be accepted by our friends on the left?
Well, it's what Thomas Sowell has called the vision of the anointed. Okay, in other words, liberals believe in grand ideas that they want a government that helps people. And so what we would think of as normal charity, that you give $1 to someone, that is in need, they expect to be done through government. Government's going to solve all these problems. And this is the vision of the anointed. The fact that they personally don't have to pay anything for this, okay? The fact that it costs them nothing. All you have to do is vote Democrat and you can vote your way into heaven. Is basically the way this works. And so we're supposed to have sympathy for these people over here, and if you don't agree with our policy, therefore you're guilty of hate. Okay? And to disagree with the modern liberal is hatred. And so that every policy discussion turns into a contest of personal morality, that they're better than you, they're more enlightened than you, they care more than you do, and that makes them your moral and intellectual superior.
All right, Mike, to spin off of that a little bit, you've been talking about how if you do not go along, you are a hater. You've been covering a story, you guys at Granite Grok, about one of the chairmen of the New Hampshire Democratic Party having very harsh words for Republicans recruiting voters in New Hampshire, saying that they're trying to register white supremacists. Have we reached the point where if you are a person who opposes DACA, if you are a person who opposes the Democrats, if you are a person who tries to get people to vote Republican, are we, according to the Democrat chair in New Hampshire, white supremacists?
Well, that's what they'd like you to think. Remember, the whole point about the operating method of the Democrats is to delegitimize their opponents and make you afraid to be a Republican, that it's unacceptable to be a Republican. Because there are some people who call themselves rabid right-wingers when they are in fact leftists, then the Democrats somehow make it possible to claim that all Republicans are in fact Nazis. We know, of course, the Nazis are leftists, the KKK are leftists, and yet the Democrats, for convenience and for stigmatization, will want to say that all of us are in fact from the Klan, from the neo-Nazis, and that we are haters. It's in fact exactly the opposite. And it is the Democrats that register voters illegally, not the Republicans. And of course, any attempt to simply make voting irregular is considered an act of hate these days, as the judge in Texas tried to rule.
In fact, it's worth noting that at least one reporter, Sam Stein, did not seem to understand that DACA people could not vote already because they were not citizens. He was commenting, the solution is for these DACA kids to vote against Trump, but not realizing that they could not vote in the first place.
They can't vote. And let me be clear here as an immigrant. I can't vote because I have not yet taken citizenship, but I am legally here. I am a permanent resident, and as such, I am entitled to contribute to campaigns, to work on campaigns, but I cannot vote for the candidates. And I recognize and respect that. And I don't vote even in the town elections. But if there's something I want, I get out and agitate for it. I stand at the polls with the totems. I do what I need to do. I contribute my hard-earned cash. These folks can't vote, shouldn't vote, and they don't even have legal status yet, which means they can't get involved in campaigns and should be deported for trying. And let me be clear, too, about DACA, deferred action. In other words, we're temporarily allowing you to break the law. The whole point of immigration is to bring in the people that we want. And the way we do that is by vetting them at the source. I was not allowed to set foot on US soil until I had been checked as a good person with no criminal background, that I was employable, that I had an offer of employment, that I had a return plane ticket guaranteed before I could come in. Why is it that we allow these people to cross the southern border or any other border and simply claim asylum and say that they're entitled to stay here because they're human? No, there's humans all over the planet. We're not entitled to just go and stay in their countries.
Right.
And finally,
They'll shoot us.
they lie about everything, especially their age. We know that the teenage Islamic refugees invading Europe are 20, 25, 30-year-old warriors, not children. And we don't know about the ages of the Mexicans, Guatemalans, Salvadorians, and others crossing the southern border, except we can bet a lot of the boys claim to be teenagers when they are in fact not. Otherwise, they would be eligible for deportation immediately. I'll stop there.
Now, I want to bring in the Boston Tea Party here, Pat, because we haven't talked about the political angle, and there was a tweet out earlier this week that really struck me, where a conservative activist was saying, if Congress passes DACA without repealing Obamacare, conservative activists are going to be up the wall. And I put up a post saying, I would trade the repeal of Obamacare for DACA. Rush Limbaugh has said he would trade DACA for the building of the wall. As a head of the Boston Tea Party, what is the feeling of activists that you have seen on this? Are they willing to make that deal? Are they looking for something else? Or is this a sign non qua, you are not going to let this go through?
People are all over on this. As Limbaugh has been pointing out, it's an issue because it's about children, and that's a tough sell. There's a certain political optics to that. It sounds like oftentimes that people are willing to say, okay, well, we'll deal with the children, maybe let that go, but we need to tighten up immigration in every other area, build the wall, make sure that that all the remaining laws are enforced. The one thing about the whole immigration debate and the charges against conservatives, people don't realize that conservatives are individualist primary. We're not racist, sexist, bigot, homophobes. We look at people as individuals. These are people, these are human beings. They need to be treated fairly, but that also means that everybody else gets treated fairly. We would love to be able to offer as many immigrants an opportunity to come into our country, but unfortunately what's happening is, as Diana pointed out, and I've heard this statistic myself, a good 3/4 of them are receiving government benefits. It's not meant with an open safety net that we have. We need to control our borders. When maybe we've got our safety net under control, maybe we can look at letting more people in because we'll have a more prosperous society.
Okay, now John, you've been talking about this on the radio over the last couple of weeks. What is your sense of how the public feels about this from the radio stuff you've done? See?
I'm going to agree with Pat. I think that there's people all over the place. But one thing, we hear, and oh my goodness, I almost went off the road laughing. There's somebody running for city council in Worcester. Of course, we all know Worcester's background. And that classic Howie Carmine, it's for the children. It's on a lawn sign, Worcester. It's funny. But let's talk about the children for a second. Under the Obama administration, for health care, children are 26 years old. Under DACA, under the Obama administration, children are up to 36 years old. Okay? Now, I guess I can have some compassion if you're an infant, if you're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, used to riding in the back of wagons or undercover and moving around because things are different in different countries. But I think once you, let's say, get into the 10, 11, 12, definitely the teens, you have to know that you're here illegally because you have to take steps to protect your well-being in this country and to not be sought out. And one little comment I'd just like to throw in is, I'm getting so frustrated, even though I'm Catholic myself. I wish these bishops would stick to religion and not to politics.
Amen.
This new movement, and it comes, I believe, from the Pope down, and the bishops are out there, we have to support, we need to support these people. No, we don't. What I want to do is I want to go to church tomorrow, and I want to ask one of these bishops and say, well, excuse me, the 10 Commandments, right? Yeah, the 10 Commandments. Well, which one of those can I just break all the time, and you guys are going to say, oh, it's okay? I just want to know, because if it's okay to come into this country and commit a felony, and to continue to commit the felony, and lie and be undercover and underground.
And don't forget documents that have to be forged.
Exactly. So I want to know which one of the 10 Commandments that we can now just not pay attention to anymore. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to go through the panel very quickly. I know you had a comment you want to make. I'm gonna throw a question out there. I want you to make your comment first, and then I'm gonna throw a question for everybody before we move to the next topic. Go ahead.
Just remember that it's for the children, so when I rob the bank and I give all that money that I stole to my son, you guys aren't allowed to take it from him, because it's for the children, all right? And the fact that I had to shoot somebody to steal it doesn't matter, it's for the children, I gave it to my son. It's not my money, it's my son's money, so that's the way this should work. Any parent will do that. Any parent would be more than happy to sacrifice themselves, go to jail, to provide better for their children. We do that, we call that jobs, we call that fatherhood. This is a terrible, terrible idea. Of course one wants to be passionate, of course one wants to have more Americans. I believe we need 800 million Americans, and honestly, I'm not exactly sure how we're going to get it if we don't fix our immigration group. But I want them to come here and be Americans. I want them to come here and strive to be the best they can.
Okay, the questions for the panel, I'm going to start with John and move back this way. Does DACA pass, and do conservatives get anything for it, or does it just pass before the end of the year? John?
By my way of thinking, they better pass it, but I doubt they're going to pass it, and if it does pass, no, the conservatives aren't going to get any credit for it.
Okay.
I think there's a possibility that's going to pass because of the optics that Donald Trump is putting out there, unfortunately, and also he agrees with the Republican leadership on that. On the flip side, we darn well better get something for it. I'm hoping that is, if Trump is leading that effort, that he will do the deal and say wall, border controls, ICE strengthened ad infinitum, all of that. But will it actually happen?
Yeah, I'm afraid it'll pass and probably get nothing. It's one thing to be compassionate for actual children, but a lot of these aren't. But the most important thing here is they broke the law. Their parents broke the law. We're not splitting up families if we deport the whole family. And perhaps that's what we should do. And does it pass? Probably. Do we get anything for it? Nothing but blame. And if that happens, this will be at least the third Republican president that I know of that got fooled into, give us an adjustment to immigration to make it easier and we'll give you better border controls. It's a bit like saying, give us a small tax increase, we'll give you 3 times as much in government savings. Where have I heard that before?
Stacy?
I believe that in exchange for DACA, Republicans will be happy to walk away with magic beans, just like Jack and the Beanstalk, you know. This idea that amnesty is going to, which is what DACA is about. Amnesty is going to precede enforcement. Well, that's insane. It has never happened. Ronald Reagan got bullied in 1986 into granting an amnesty, and they said, well, this is it, this is going to square things up. They come back under Bush, Bush the first, another amnesty. John McCain has been pushing amnesty for over a decade now, and so the thing is that as long as you keep giving amnesty to illegals will keep coming. It's like it's having a picnic and expecting the ants not to show up.
Diane?
So I want to say, when are we going to start thinking about ourselves? One of my father's prescriptions last year went from $8 a month to $44 a month. That's just one prescription. And we have to know that it's because we're spending money on illegals and refugees. But I digress. It won't pass.
It won't pass.
And Ryan his life expectancy is shorter than I think he thinks.
As Speaker, you mean, of course?
Yes.
Okay, Matt?
You haven't found a leftist to do away with it, man. You just think he'll be booted out of office.
Okay, first off, I believe DACA passes. Second, I believe that we don't get either the wall or a real substantive improvement But on the larger scale, I think that we are one step closer to whoever it is that replaces Trump and makes Trump seem like that quaint old Republican, like, Gerald Ford. When this new guy or gal comes and becomes president and is even crazier than Donald Trump, we'll have to come back to this moment and realize this is when that campaign started.
I'm going to predict that
Hang on. In March of 2018.
This is Chris speaking, by the way.
2018, March of 2018, DACA is already been set to expire. Think about this for a second. Who was the supposed and imagined proposed president supposed to be come March 2018?
Hillary Clinton.
In full fanfare, press conference, the DACA children standing behind her as she signs that document. This is all blown up. But what Donald Trump has done is he literally took this and he told Congress, you got 6 months. Guess what? 6 months, March 2018. It's already expired. Make a decision. Yet this is the problem, is everybody is blaming Donald Trump. This thing has already been, it's already been adjudicated, it's already been signed years ago. These kids are not kids anymore. You guys were all talking about some of them grown up, this, that, the other thing. I think there's something like, out of the 800,000, there's 3,000 plus or minus have actual criminal records, if some of them aren't gang members. That kind of thing. So in March 2018, this thing expires. Congress has to decide on an already unconstitutional document signed by our former president. So how do we reconcile Congress passing a law on an unconstitutional thing to begin with?
Can I say one more thing? I just want to
Go ahead, Nancy.
When Chris said kids, so I was thinking of Congress as the kids, because, no, seriously, think about this, because they've had decades and decades of getting away with bad behavior, not following through, not working, not having any accountability. And so now, Daddy, President Trump, tells them, kids, you have 6 months. Now, the kids, we know from their past behavior that they're not going to be able to pull it off. They are not going to be able to pull this off, and they're saying, is Daddy really serious? Is he really serious? That's what, I'm telling you, this is what's happening. It's not going to pass.
All right, it is my opinion that it's my opinion that it will pass with a combination of Democratic votes and liberal Republicans. It is my opinion that while officially President Trump will get nothing but just a little bit of praise, because normally Republicans get the blame and Democrats get the praise. He set himself up to get praise for this, and the question is, will the media want to give him praise? That's why it may or may not pass, so they may want to put it down on him. But one thing that people are missing is that the wall has been moving forward slowly, quietly, with bids out and so forth already.
That's true.
And there may be the perception that we've got something for it, even though all we're getting is something that Trump is already doing, which might, I think it's all going to be about the optics and how those optics play. But I think Congress ends up doing something. I think it's going to divide conservatives. I think there's going to be trouble about it. The real question is going to be, how will the media spin it? All right, our next issue is free speech, Antifa, and so forth. And I want to start with you, Diane, because this is really the reason. For those of you watching at home or watching the stream who don't know, Diane was not originally going to be part of this panel. I met Diane for the first time last month at the Friday morning group. She was announcing an event, and I had interviewed her afterwards, and I thought it was a shame because it was going to conflict with ours. Act for America, of which she is the Boston chapter president, was going to have rallies all over the country. And those rallies were canceled because of what's happened in Boston, what's happened elsewhere, because as a question of safety. And I wanted you to speak on this first, because we were outraged over here, so we made it a point to invite you, because, no, we're not gonna have ACT silence, we like ACT over here, so we're very proud that you came to join us. Is this an example of, although it's not specifically feminism, is this part of the totalitarian movement to destroy civilization as we know it?
Yes, yes, yes. So for those of you who don't know, so they say that I'm the Boston chapter leader, but basically all of Massachusetts except for the Cape, that's our team. So all of Massachusetts except for the Cape. If you're here and you could take a card from me, I'd like you to do that because I just took over, and so what we're doing is we're starting a weekly conference call, because if you're in charge of all of Massachusetts, it makes it very difficult to have meetings. And we're doing it every Sunday night at 7. We start promptly at 7, and we end promptly at 7:50. That's the therapy hour. That's why we did it that way. So if you're interested, and we're doing it every week because not everybody can come join us every week. You'll get information, you can join, you can call in if you don't have time, call in the next week. So that's happening. And for those of you who don't know, ACT is a grassroots organization. It's the largest national security grassroots organization in the United States. Right now there are over 750,000 people who have joined ACT, and half of that membership has come within the last maybe year and a half.
Really?
Yes, so that's pretty exciting. President Trump and Brigitte Gabriel, who's the founder of ACT for America, they have a relationship, not a relationship, but a relationship. They talk to one another.
Did you say Brigitte?
Gabrielle.
Gabrielle Brigitte.
The author of she's got a book.
Yes.
What's the name of the book?
Because they
hate. That's the best book about radical.
There you go.
Yeah, okay.
And then there's a conference. ACT has a conference every year, and I'll be down there. It's October 1st and the 2nd. Maybe I'll see you down there.
So I bet you're friends with Pamela Geller.
I have not met her,
Michelle Gellar.
but I know of her.
Stacy and I are both friends with Pamela Geller and
Okay, well,
Robert
you guys-
Spencer.
So I've met Robert Spencer, but
Yep.
but what I want to say is that I was at that rally. Now I went to the rally. And normally, when I go to an event, I invite a lot of people to go. Specifically, this time I didn't want to bring anybody else because having grown up in Roxbury, you can smell what's going to happen a mile away. So I went by myself, but I met a friend of mine who was an Army Ranger down there. And I wanted to see what was happening. And I can just tell you that murderous rage was in the air. And that's not an exaggeration. These people, I wasn't up near the stage at all. In this crowd of, they said almost 40,000 people. Many people in this group they were looking to fight. They were looking to hurt people. My friend Paul made the mistake of making a comment when something was happening, and this throng of people moved in on him. I stepped away because I knew that it was going to hit the fan. He still